Good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Professor Spooner.
Uh, so, not all that much has changed in the past week, I don't think, but I was reading an article in the Financial Times this morning, which is one of the best informants about the process of globalization, and it had an opinion piece by Martin Wolf suggesting that globalization has stalled.
What?
And he introduced this by saying that he doesn't usually talk about migration because nobody wants that. So there's no point in talking about it if you're talking about globalization. He usually talks about the economics and the politics. And in fact, since the economic downturn, which is nearly 10 years ago now, it seems as though the liberalization of trade and everything that has to do with the political organization of trade has not been not been advancing at all. So I thought that was an interesting perspective, even though I can't agree with it, because I don't think he has a theory of globalization, and I do. I try to make the facts fit the theory. He talks about the facts without having to bother about a theory. And I think that, and he does mention the fact that technology hasn't stalled. But it's interesting that, in fact, migration is a big factor. However, even though migration is, everybody's getting more and more against migration, nevertheless, it doesn't mean to say that people are traveling less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's the travel of the favored parts of the global population which is maintaining the process of globalization, I think.
I find it very interesting. What data points did he cite to support his theory that trade increases, the velocity of trade has not kept up with so-called globalization?
Well, he's got a lot of statistics, which I can't actually show on the screen now.
Okay.
And I'm not a good judge of. I assume that if he cites them, they're correct.
Yeah,
but of course, all statistics are selective to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it is true that in financial terms, there has been a big slowdown in Europe, and to some extent, it affected America, although it doesn't seem to be affecting America now.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Brexit hasn't improved that, even though
Mm-hmm.
England doesn't really seem to be suffering from Brexit at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So there are plenty of things he can point to, and of course it's a good way to get readership.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of a number of points to support the opposite view, as I'm sure you can too. I mean, our whole discussions are predicated on the opposite view.
Well, I saw that Lloyd's is thinking of starting an office outside London.
Oh yeah, the chairman made that very clear at the annual Lloyd's dinner on Monday night.
Uh-huh.
He threw the gauntlet down. He was standing next to the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who immediately then got up and said, "I'm sure we could be able to work something out. Reasonable minds will come to the right conclusion." But yeah, Lloyd's is going to have to start writing business for the European Union within one of their European subsidiaries. They're not going to have any choice.
Uh-huh. No, since what I read didn't say where they were thinking of moving, and I wondered whether it was Europe or somewhere else.
Yeah, it'll be Europe, probably Luxembourg or one of those smaller countries over there. I mean, they have offices in each one of those countries anyway. I don't think for political reasons they would do it in Ireland, especially with the flap with the Apple tax situation now. I don't think they'd go near it.
Yeah, yeah. No, the Apple tax situation and the problems Google is having in Europe are interesting, and one wonders what effect that's going to have in the long run.
Well, I would cite both of those two as evidence that Martin Wolf is not quite correct. I mean, there you once again have. I mean, we always talk about how individuals and people are leading the charge on increasing connectivity and interactivity, but here we have two big companies that are leading the charge, and governments can't keep up with them.
Yes. So and nothing. There doesn't seem to be anything threatening happening in China with the Chinese financial situation, even though people have been talking about the possibilities of a big problem in China because of the debt. But nothing's happened recently, I don't think.
Well, I think they can keep a lid on it with the authoritarian government that they have, as we've noted.
Well, now Xi Jinping is shaking hands with the prime minister or president in, was it Laos or Cambodia? Cambodia.
It was in Laos.
Laos, was it? And Obama's going to Cambodia?
I think so. I think so. I mean, that was quite a situation with the Philippine president.
Yes.
I'll tell you something. I was at a hotel at a restaurant, and the fellow who was waiting on us was from the Philippines. And I made a comment mildly questionable about the president of the Philippines and his drug dealer murdering policy. And this fellow got pretty exercised. He was very supportive of him. He said, "This is wonderful news, what he's doing. Everybody over there supports him 100%. I was thunderstruck.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that was just one person. God knows. I mean, I know that there's a Philippine Senate investigation that's ongoing, looking at the murders, and obviously Obama had indicated he was going to say something, which prompted the outburst.
Yeah.
So,
And Trump went to Mexico.
Trump went to Mexico for
Talked to the president,
for 2 hours. Yes.
which is quite amazing.
It is. Now the finance minister has been fired in Mexico for having arranged the visit. So
But still, the visit took place.
the visit occurred.
And what about the Middle East over the last week?
Well, the Middle East is going to shift now about 2,000 miles to the northeast. They're going to reconvene in Moscow.
But Theresa May is not going to stop selling British arms to get to the Saudis.
No, and why should she? Britain needs the money. But once again, I mean, Putin has continued to exercise his influence because the Netanyahu and the president of the Palestinian Authority have agreed to meet in Moscow in Russian brokered talks to try to come to yet again another attempt at some sort of solution.
Yeah. However, the problem between Iran and Saudi Arabia doesn't seem to be getting any better.
No.
And I heard an episode on the BBC a couple of days ago, I think, where they were interviewing a Muslim woman who said she represented a new organization of women that are campaigning to get the Hajj taken out of the hands of Saudi Arabia and put in the hands of an international organization to manage the Hajj.
Well, that's a noble effort. It won't happen in our lifetimes.
Well, I don't know. I think Saudi Arabia is beginning to have increasing problems, partly because of the downturn in the price of oil, which doesn't seem to be getting any worse, but it's not getting much better either. And partly because of and that means that it's more difficult for them to suppress dissent in their own country. And the disagreement with Iran, which is, after all, the most powerful country in the whole of the Middle East. Although in Iran, the campaign for who's going to succeed the current supreme leader seems to be waking up.
Tell me who you think is waiting in the wings from a policy perspective behind him.
I have no idea. I don't think there's any clear candidate, and it could be the beginning of a big change.
Yeah, I mean he's ill. He's afflicted with cancer. He's in his almost mid-80s, and I have to believe that when the United States and the West engaged in that agreement with the Iranians, that there were intelligence estimates as to who would be next, because the deal they were making, yes, it was with him, but it was also aimed at who's coming behind him.
You have great faith in the Foreign Office, in the State Department, sorry.
Well, I think that's just basic logic. I hope I'm not wrong. Um,
I don't know. I mean, I think that the situation in the Iranian society is beyond the control of the current, what's called a theocracy. I don't like the term because God is not running the government. The mullahs are running the government. It's a country of 80 million people, very sophisticated, highly educated, with universities all over the country, with more women in universities than men.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's something.
And I think that it's just a matter of time before things change. And the change of leadership may be what it takes, because the new leader will have to start all over again as far as cementing all his connections are concerned.
Well, it could prompt a change one way or the other. If they pick a hard liner, that could really provoke a bit of a response, an outrage. Where on the other hand, if they pick somebody who's slightly moderate, that would obviously be good on its face. So,
and it isn't clear either who is going to do the picking.
correct. Right.
It's a system full of the sort of checks and balances that Americans usually take into account, so it's not up to any single group of people, and certainly not up to any single person.
Mm-hmm.
And the connections between the Iranian view of Islam and similar views of Islam in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq in particular, but also other parts of the Islamic world, have been getting closer. And it could make a very big difference.
It would make an astounding difference in the whole dynamic of that part of the world and well beyond.
Yeah.
I mean, if they come to the table with a democratically elected government that is relatively moderate and not advocating that Shia extremism, it could be unbelievable.
But there's also the increasing tendency for people to not bother about religion.
In Iran?
In Iran.
Well,
I told you I get emails from students who'd like to come and study at Penn, and they want to make sure that I know that they're atheists.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can see that, and I mean, this is where I would suspect, I would also argue with Mr. Wolf as well on globalization. I mean, globalization is being pushed by the forces we always discuss, but it's also being pushed by the upcoming generation.
Yeah.
So
that didn't come out to vote for Brexit.
that's correct. That's correct. Well, very good, Brian. Thank you very much. I'll give you a report from the French Riviera next week.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Cheers.
All right, bye.
Bye.